Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Gridiron Nation Online for another week. I'm Jerod Smalley, joined by Coach Bill Conley, our Buckeye analyst, as we get you set for another Buckeye week. And what an interesting one it is, because it's not a Buckeye Saturday this week, it's a Buckeye Friday. And we have some breaking news on that game to tell you about here in just a second here. First of all, Coach, we haven't had a lot of time to talk since, Michigan State, right? All we've done is talk.
That's all we've talked. Time for action.
Bye week last week. We're tired of talking. But your thoughts on the value of that bye week, having played 6 consecutive weeks of physical football. What kind of football team you expect to show up on Friday night?
Well, I think first of all, the bye week is always good to get guys rested up. At the same time, the job is for the coaching staff to try to keep things pretty much in the same type of scheme that they've been doing. For example, you want to make sure you don't lose any of the physicality, the hustle, the effort. Those are things that you only can really practice and see it happen in a game situation. But these guys are playing great. The coaches know just what buttons to push for the players, and also gives a chance to work on recruiting a little bit too.
Exactly right. So a lot of was accomplished there in the last 10 days or so as they get ready for this one. Obviously, the game now is Friday night. The breaking news that we have on the game is where you can see the game. Kind of a backstory here, I'll explain. The Yankee game, postponed by rain, I should say. That game was on FS1, scheduled to be. It's going to push the television schedule back a day. That runs into Friday. So game 4 of that series with the Yankees is going to be Friday night on Fox Sports 1, FS1. The problem is, or game 5, I should say, my apologies. The problem is that's where the Buckeye game is supposed to be, FS1. So we've just learned that the Ohio State game with Northwestern Friday night, same game time, 8:30 Eastern, is not going to be on Big Ten Network. So if you're looking for the game Friday,
there you go.
Big Ten Network is going to have the game. So that is a critical element to everything we're going to be talking about today, is the fact that people are going to be questioning, where can I see this game now? How is it moving? That solves it. Big Ten Network will have the game on Friday, so that's where you can check it out. Having said that, Bill, we'll move on to Friday, and obviously we're seeing you live today on NBC4, NBC4i.com, and on the NBC4 Facebook page. If you have a comment or question for Coach Conley, very simple. You go to the Facebook page. I'm in there right now. You simply go to the comment tab below, write in your question, your comment, just say hello. Tell us where you're watching us from today, and we'll certainly give you a shout out here on the air as we talk about Buckeye football for the next 20, 25 minutes or so. So, Coach, let's get into Northwestern a little bit. Right. Obviously, it has been a rough year for the Wildcats. They're 1-4 coming in. And, Bill, it just, from what we saw a year ago, a team make the Big Ten championship game, it has been a far, far cry from what we saw.
Exactly. And the big problem is injuries at key positions, the skilled player positions especially. Number 1 quarterback went down. You got the running back situation who's hurt, the top wide receivers hurt, and they've really been struggling. You know, this team has only thrown 2 touchdown passes all year. Oof. And that they've thrown 7 or 8 interceptions this year. Yeah. So they've really been struggling to put points on the board.
Only 2 teams in America have scored fewer points per game than Northwestern.
And one of them's Rutgers.
That's right. They're 128 out of 130. That's not very good. And you mentioned the issues they've had throwing the football. Yeah. They've played 3 different quarterbacks. Hunter Johnson is a transfer quarterback at Northwestern who came from the Clemson program, formerly a #1 rated player in the country out of high school. Just an incredible talent out of high school. And, Bill, it's been a struggle early on here for him.
Oh, and that's the reason why he transferred. He wasn't getting any playing time in Clemson.
What's going to happen there?
Will not, yeah. And so it's one of those situations, you know, the quarterback position, I think, Jerod, above all positions on the football field, is the one that when you go up a level, you go to high school to college, then you go college to the NFL, you know, it's a completely different football game. Some guys adjust very well, some do not, and some takes a lot longer to adjust. Fortunately, we got a guy named Justin Fields that's adjusted real well.
Pretty good. He's 100% okay. It's funny, great story this week. Pat Fitzgerald, the head coach of Northwestern, was talking about the fact he thought out of high school they had a great chance to get Justin Fields. They were on him early. They loved his run-pass ability. Well, so did everybody. Yeah. And as it turned out, when Justin Fields went from a guy that some people knew to a guy that everybody knew, Northwestern had no shot to get him. He went to a 5-star recruit and ultimately one of the highest-rated players to ever ultimately play at Ohio State. Obviously, there was a stop at Georgia in between there. But they really thought they had a chance at him, and they had a great relationship with the family, loved him. that's the kind of, so they know very well what's coming into Evanston Friday night and the kind of plays he can make and the danger he can be.
Well, I'm sure that also as he got more notoriety and as he got better himself, he realized he needed to go to a place where he's going to have a great surrounding cast, which he picked Georgia to begin with and Ohio State, because you're only as good as the guys around you, and he made a smart decision.
Very interesting. James Hott, I should say, here on Facebook comments asks, what if you don't have Big Ten Network? Classic problem. If you don't have Big Ten Network, a couple solutions.
Radio.
You got radio. You can listen to Bill do the pregame show on 610 radio.
Yeah.
And then, of course, your friendly neighborhood sports bar. That's the one solution.
Well, that's a reason to get out of the house.
Get out of the house.
Absolutely.
That's pretty much your solution there. If you don't have Big Ten Network, that's probably the best way to do it. There are other ways you can do it, maybe over your phone, but many of those obviously require a cable subscription as well. So that's obviously not a perfect answer there. Let's talk a little bit more about Ohio State, Bill, going into this bye week. They were beaten up a little bit. Coming out of that, a chance to rest. The other day, what Ryan Day said was very telling. He thought they had to stay really in game preparation mode. And what they did was they gave every player 3 points of emphasis to work on the rest of the season, not just the bye week, but the rest of the year. Take me through from a coach's perspective of how you get your players mentally engaged during that bye week so that when you get back to the next opponent, that they're not only rested, they're hungry.
Well, the main way you did it is through film study. You know, I used to, as a head coach, I always had my players a scouting report they had to fill out. I had certain questions, certain things they had to diagram and things like that. I'm sure the coaches at Ohio State are doing exactly the same thing. So that's how you keep them engaged. You have so many hours of film watching you expect out of your players each week, and that's easy to figure that out.
Yeah.
So, you know, you keep them engaged that way. But also, I got to say this, you know, this is a mature football team, I think. This is not an average football team. These guys, from day one, it seemed like they're putting the extra time on their own, and not as individuals necessarily, but in a group situation, position specific, to make sure that they fine-tune their skills.
Yeah. Again, if you have a question or comment about Ohio State football, Coach Bill Conley is here to answer it. Go to NBC4's Facebook page if that's how you're watching us right now. Pull up the comments tab, write your comment or question in there, and I'll get it to Coach Conley here in the next few minutes. So let's talk a little bit about, Bill, Northwestern defensively. That's what they're known for under Coach Pat Fitzgerald. He was obviously an All-American linebacker in his playing career, and he's developed great defenses at Northwestern despite some of the challenges that are inherent to the Northwestern program.
Right.
And he has done a masterful job. It's all you can say. They don't win 10 games a year, but they are always competitive and they always play hard. This year's defense, it's kind of confusing. They're a top 30 defense, and many of the guys that played on that Big Ten title game defense are back. But again, Bill, it just has not been as consistent. And the other problem is their offense hasn't helped them out very much.
Yeah, I think that's it. You look at the number one problem that their defense has, they're on the field too long.
Yeah.
You know, they've had to stop other opponents, and they can't move the ball. They can't get a first down. You know, Northwestern's offense has only scored 30 points, over 30 points one time this year. And so they've been on the field a lot. And the only way, and they'll tell you this, they preach what they call TNT, takeaways and turnovers. That's the only way they have a chance to beat the team, especially like Ohio State.
Yeah.
You know, the last time they upset us way back in 2004, it's because we had 3 turnovers.
Yeah.
You know, you can't turn the ball over against this team. They want to get the ball on the opponent's end of the 50 and try to put it in the end zone.
You're right.
They haven't been good at that, though. Their percentage of putting in the end zone is not very high.
No, that talent disparity, Bill, eventually, if you don't let them hang around, if you don't give them opportunities, it's just going to take over at some point. It might not be for a little while, but eventually they just don't have enough horses comparable to what a team like Ohio State would put out there.
Yeah, and then they hope they can get some plays on the special teams.
Sure.
That's their hope. But again, one of the problems the Northwestern team has that we do not have is speed. You go to block a punt or something like that, you have some guys unless there's a bad snap or something, you have to have guys with speed off the edge.
Right.
And they don't have a lot of guys like that.
Well, speaking of special teams, it's really been a great staple. The first half of the Ohio State season, special teams have really been, I wouldn't say the return games have been outstanding. They've been okay. They haven't made giant mistakes, for example, in the punt return game and the kick return game. They've had some moments, but generally it's been okay. But blocking kicks and challenging kicks.
Right.
They have been as good as anybody in America, Bill. And, you know, this is one of those games where one play like that early and it's lights out probably.
Yeah, and that's why teams like Ohio State that have those great talented athletes, skilled athletes, they're on special teams too. It's not the old days where you put the second and third teamers on special teams. You put your best players on special teams.
Right.
And, you know, they're the example. Chase Young, great at blocking at kicks. Those guys have to be on the field because they make a big play. Those are the plays that can turn a game around. Those are, or put, in some cases, like for Ohio State, put games away.
Yeah, if you're just coming on board with us here on NBC4i.com and on the NBC4 Facebook page, welcome. If you have a question for Coach Conley, pass it on board in that comments tab there at the bottom of the Facebook page. Put it right there, question or comment, your opinion, whatever you think about Ohio State football this week. And here's one that I think will probably get you, I don't know about angry at the right point because it's not time to get angry yet. LSU moved to number 2 in the polls on their win over Florida, the heat of that win. Obviously, Joe Burrow with another sensational game for them. Ohio State actually fell, despite Georgia's loss, fell from a tie for 3rd to 4th because the pollsters moved LSU to 2nd. Any problem with that?
No, not right now. It's all good right now. As long as we're in the top echelon there, the top 4 or 5, we'll be okay because we have some big games coming up. We got to take care of business and also beat Wisconsin, take care of business, beat Penn State, and of course our arch rival. We'll be fine. We'll be definitely one of the top 4.
Let me give you, here's why I wanted to bring that up. Here's what I think about that. If you don't put LSU at 1st or 2nd, rewarding them for what they've done this year against their schedule, they beat 2 teams at the time they played them, were ranked in the top 10. They went on the road for 1, and they were actually down against Florida and came back.
Right.
If you don't reward them for that, then what's the point of playing? Now, you got to use your eyeballs, right? And if you really do believe that LSU is a better team than Ohio State, you need to rank them accordingly. If you think that Clemson, who, by the way, has not played sensationally, they did a nice job against Florida State the other day, but they really struggled against North Carolina in that game and barely got out of there with a win. If their body of work is not as impressive, you need to rank it accordingly. So I don't have any problem at all putting LSU number 1, let alone number 2, because they've done the most this year. But to your point, that's half a year.
Yeah.
And we all knew this Ohio State schedule was backloaded as it is. Right. You're going to see next week at noon at Ohio Stadium how good they really are.
Yeah, exactly right. And you take an example, you know, the Florida team. It's a great win for LSU. And again, another rated team. But I think they're an overrated Florida team. I really do.
Playing a backup quarterback, too.
Playing a backup quarterback. I saw him play against Miami early in the year. And this is not the Florida teams you think of as being explosive and things like that. Good, solid football team.
Yeah.
But I think when it's all going to come out in the wash at the end of the year, I think Florida will lose another at least 1 or 2 games before the year's over.
Yeah.
And I think it could end up being, you see a collision like 2 trains come down the track. It could be LSU, OSU.
Wouldn't that be something?
Football.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah.
By the way, I read a couple things this week we're going to talk about here before we're done here online here today. I read a Pro Football Focus column this morning rating the prospects available for the 2020 NFL Draft. They have the first round projections out. Number 3, they've got Jeffrey Okudah. Number 2, they've got Chase Young. Number 1, Joe Burrow.
How about that?
All 3 of those guys are wearing Buckeye uniforms 2 years ago. I mean, just incredible to think the kind of talent they have amassed at Ohio State, whether they're playing there now or not. Another point we wanted to bring up is preseason All-American lists. Everybody had Chase Young, and obviously that's not going to change. Chase, I would argue he's been the best player in America, regardless of position. But the emergence, I think, of Justin Fields in that role, he's not a mid-season All-American guy, but he's certainly in that discussion at quarterback, which is not easy to do. And then the emergence of Jeffrey Okudah and also Jordan Fuller, both regarded by many people who do this sort of ranking of a mid-season All-American, which, whatever. But it's a thing, right? They're both in that All-American group, first team. And it does give you a little more clarity on, why teams just can't throw the ball well against Ohio State at this point. It's because, well, you've got 2 elite talents back there taking it away. And that's not even to mention Shaun Wade, who probably at some point will be that kind of a player.
Oh, exactly. I mean, just the thing we've talked about all year, Jerod, is the depth. I mean, great depth. I mean, guys, they're out there challenging each other. Who's going to have the most tackles today? Who's going to have the most breakups or pass interception today? That's the way they're playing. And let's also give a little shout out to our man Wyatt Davis, who was mentioned on the second team.
Wasn't that
preseason.
something?
How about that?
Yeah, and I think he's rewarded because when you go back and watch tapes of if you DVR the game and you go back and watch it through, well, obviously you know who won the game. So if you go back and study it, don't look at the football, look at the line.
Right.
Wyatt Davis finishes people. I mean, he picks them up, puts them down, and plays with some nastiness. And I think that's a general trait among the whole five. But when you see Wyatt finishing people off with some anger, he was a five-star guy out of high school anyway.
Right.
So he was talented enough to do this, but playing with a nasty streak, and that is probably the difference in the team right now.
Yeah, and he's paid his dues.
Yeah.
I mean, he's worked to get where he's at. And let's face it, the success that the offense has had is mainly because of the offensive line. Great quarterback, great running backs, things like that. But they are the ones that provide the pass protection. They're the ones that open the holes for the linemen, for J.K. and our man, Master Teague. So it's one of those situations where it's nice to see those guys being recognized for their success.
Excellent. Again, if you have a question or comment for Coach Conley in the NBC4 Facebook that you're watching us here live, Facebook Live, put a comment there in the comment tab, and we'll get it right to Coach. Actually, one just popped in here. I'll just read it to you, Coach, from Amy.
Okay.
Amy writes, OSU should not have dropped to number 4. Alabama should not be at number 1. They always have a cupcake schedule. So I agree with part of what you said, Amy. If you don't think Alabama's number 1, you shouldn't rank them there. And that's my argument about maybe why you rank LSU number 1, because if you think they're the best team and they've beaten the best teams so far, why not reward them for that?
Yeah.
However, I think when you're forecasting what's going to happen down the line and you're trying to have the number 1 team in the number 1 spot for where you think they're going to end, I do think it's hard not to put Bama number 1 based on what you've seen so far. I could see, and I think 9 voters this week did see, putting Ohio State number 1 because of what they've accomplished. And I think it's just your eyeball test, right? But at this point, it's an educated guess.
Right.
We're going to get more information and make a better guess here in the next 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, I think when you look at body of work already done, the 2 teams that have played the toughest of those schedules, OSU and LSU. So they should be up there. I'll agree with you with 1 and 2. Teams like Clemson, Alabama, they were there because of what they did last year, not so much what they've done this year.
Right.
And I'm not sure that's the right way to do it. Because you look at, I always thought it was the idea of rewarding teams at the end of the year, which is going to be the key for, not only complete success during the season, but also the teams that get better as the year goes on.
Yeah.
Because you want the best teams playing at the end of the year. Some teams aren't as good in the first game of the year. They're better in the last game of the year.
Right.
And so, that's why the whole process, that's why I personally think this playoff thing's going to go to an 8-team deal.
It's got to happen eventually.
Got to happen.
Because there's too many good teams now.
Too many good teams.
Well, I mean, it's the genius. It makes so much sense in college football. You create a 4-team playoff system for a 5-league system.
Right. And the other part of it is
real smart.
Yeah, here's the other part of it is scheduling. So you can't to make it to the playoffs right now, you can't play 7 tough football games during the year.
No, you won't make it.
You won't be physical. You won't have enough of a record, and you won't be physically able to handle it.
Right.
So that's why a lot of teams do have weak schedules, so they can kind of survive the season and make it to the playoffs.
It might be the genius plan for Ohio State that kind of worked out this way. Remember, there was originally going to be a home-and-home series with TCU. That was going to be the big non-conference game this year. That probably could have been fine this year. But if you think back to TCU 6-7 years ago, that might not have been. That would have been a really, really good football game. And that's where the scheduling kind of favored them this year because it worked out where they didn't have as much meat, if you will, up front. Couple questions. David, update on the game. Television, Big Ten Network, Friday night, 8:30, same kickoff time, but moving to Big Ten Network Friday instead of FS1. So we'll make that clear. Brian, who's the backup quarterback right now, Hoke or Chugnoff? I think it's pretty clear Chugnoff is getting the next most reps, and the rationale we've heard is basically that Hoke is still trying to learn the offense because he got here late, got here after spring football. I don't think that would change, and I think, for example, if it gets out of hand Friday night, I think you're going to see Chugnoff next in the game, I'd presume.
Right, but at the same time, Coach Day and the staff, they're trying to play both if they can.
Yeah.
And they've been doing that. And they're really close. I mean, there's a big difference between the number 2 guy and the number 1 guy. Between 2 and 3, they're pretty interchangeable, again, with the experience factor going to Chugginoff.
That would be the thing. I think if you're in a tough spot and you got to play him, I think he's the one you feel most comfortable with because he's run the system most. And I'll tell you, he's actually done a nice job. He threw a beautiful touchdown pass in the Miami game to Garrett Wilson, and he's done some really nice things when he's been out there. Admittedly, mop-up duty, but so far been a pretty good player, a football player for him. So one quick note about Friday, Bill. Interesting schedule this week. They had to bump everything back a day, so practices really started Monday. They had meetings on Sunday this week, but really Monday was Tuesday. So the Bloody Tuesday practice was Monday this week, and everything bumped back. So they'll actually go to Evanston tomorrow. There is one thing that's curious about this, Bill. Wisconsin plays Saturday. Buckeyes play Friday night. If you're looking for minute advantages, maybe the Bucks have a little bit more rest time, make the travel home from Evanston, and have another day to kind of rest up before they get the Badgers in here next Saturday. Yeah,
that would only be a major issue if somebody like Jonathan Taylor gets banged up on a Saturday.
Sure.
Who might need an extra day to heal up or something like that. But overall, shouldn't have any major effect at all.
Wouldn't think it'd be a big deal.
No.
Let's talk about Wisconsin a little bit because that's the one, so obviously the players and the coaches, they don't get to look ahead, but we do. And that's the beautiful thing about it. As a matter of fact, wait a minute, I got this graphic right here. Check it out. There it is. Coming next week.
Oh,
those guys.
You're game plan ahead of time.
I think these things through, Bill. Next week, it's going to. I was actually talking a good friend of mine is a sports director at one of the stations in Madison. He's an old friend of mine, and we were chatting last night about, are they already talking up there about it? I'm like, we're already talking about it here, no doubt. Let's talk about that. Having that game and the weight of that game hanging over you as you get ready for a game. It's a challenge every coach of every good football team has ever faced. When you've got a real big game and a game that's maybe not so big right before it, how did you, in your experience, try to battle that?
Well, you can't battle it completely, but what you try to do is not even talk about the other team. You might, as coaches, you might have a little extra meeting on that other team and stuff like that, but you don't do it around the players. You don't want the players thinking all about that. So, I would say stay off the social media. Don't dare talk about that game. And let's concentrate on one at a time. The reason we're successful right now is because we've taken it one at a time.
Yeah.
And that's what you've got to do it, and that's how you got to preach it as a coach.
For Wisconsin, obviously, the quarterback, I think, Cohen has been the big difference for them. Their ability to throw the football was really important against Michigan State because Taylor did not go over 100 yards against Michigan State, but their dominance came through the air. And they killed them on second and third down, just down the field. Tight ends had a bunch of catches for them. That's the problem with Wisconsin right now. They're more balanced, and on top of that, they're the #1 rated defense in the country. That's a tough combo for anybody. That's what faces Ohio State next week.
Yeah, I mean, you got two teams that are very similar in a lot of ways. You got great physical linemen, both sides of the ball. You've got skilled athletes. You got good running backs, good quarterback. I would argue the advantage for Ohio State is two.
Yeah.
#1, we got them in our stadium. Wisconsin is a tough place to play.
It is.
You're glad to have them at home. Second thing, the depth issue will be the factor. Even though both starting units are really good and really talented, I think our depth is going to be a key factor in that game.
And the other thing about why Wisconsin plays so well on defense, I think people are generally curious, well, they maybe don't have a bunch of five-star guys at Wisconsin, but why are they so good? In your viewing of Wisconsin this year defensively, why are they elite? Why are they shutting people down at all levels?
Well, the one thing Wisconsin's known for is they're kind of a ball control offense. So their defense doesn't have to be on the field so long. You have to really complement each other. And defense is a lot better if you can get out there and be on the, get off the field in a 3-and-out or something, and then have 4 or 5 minutes to be off the field and get rested. So I think the way they complement each other is the key.
I want to talk a little bit more about what you expect from Friday night, if there is a key for Ohio State in this game other than attend. If there's a key for Ohio State in terms of performance, things you want to see them establish coming out of the bye week, what would that be?
Well, I think is the consistency. I mean, one thing we're really good at is not turning over the football. And I think we've got to be, it has to be a clean game. It's got to be a sharp game. I think away from us, always good to start fast. So I think those three things will take care of business.
Yep. I had a question here from Carl about the Penn State game, which is coming up a few weeks away. There's going to be another bye week before that. He was asking, do you think the Penn State's going to be a night game? It's a good question. I don't know that that's a guarantee. Historically, Ohio State Penn State has been a night game, and it's been a very successful night game in terms of ratings. I'm sure they'd love to have it in prime time. I think the curiosity is, if Fox picks that game up, Fox, as you see next week, the Ohio State-Wisconsin game is a noon kickoff, and they really want to showcase the noon game. That is their prime time, if you will, is noon. So if Fox has that game, so I don't know all the backstory of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a noon game on Fox. If it's not, it's probably 7:30 on ABC. That's my guess. I'd be very surprised if it's a 3:30 kick, but you know what?
And game day is going to be there.
Potentially. And they're actually in Happy Valley this week for the Michigan game that's over there. Let's see here. Also, quick update. Yes, the game is on Big Ten Network Friday night, not FS1 anymore, Big Ten. Amy asks, has anyone noticed Justin Fields seems to hesitate, or is that just me? Do you find him hesitant throwing the ball? And I think there was an analysis of him throwing the football where his windup maybe has a little bit more of a rounded motion to it, and it might take a little longer. And I think that might visually mean that you think he's hanging on to the football a little bit too long. Is that a fair assessment?
It's fair if it's late getting there.
Yeah.
But you can have a bigger windup as long as the ball gets there. You throw it at quicker. In other words, before the receiver gets out of his break.
Gotcha.
His timing is really good. That's why his completion percentage is so good. So that doesn't bother me too much. I think one thing, which he has a little bit of luxury in the sense that he has plenty of time to throw the ball. The offensive line is protecting him so well. Yeah. So he does hold the ball sometimes and find the open receiver. I think they've done a much better job in the scrambling situation. The receivers and the quarterback are working together. They've obviously, taught the proper way to react once the scrambling quarterback takes place. Who comes back, who goes across, who goes deep. Those are things you teach receivers, and the quarterback knows that too. So it's things you drill. In 7-on-7 practice, for example, about every 10th throw or something like that, you'll throw in scramble drill. They don't know it. You'll just say scramble, and they'll start scrambling around and react to what you see. So I think all that's just an experience factor. He's holding it, but he's also making good decisions. It's better to hold it a little longer than throw it at the wrong time.
Yeah, that's more important than anything. He's only got one pick this year, and Coach Day actually took the blame for it. So he's obviously done a very good job being smart with the football. We're winding down the show here online today on the Gridiron Nation. Coach, one thing you're extremely good at every week, you're good at a lot of things, extremely good at scouting the other opponent in a unique way.
Yes.
What are some fun facts that you have about Northwestern University and the football program?
Well, here's the first one. If you're traveling to Evanston, there's two things you can't do in Evanston, Illinois. I want you to know right now. You can't spit on the sidewalk. Can't do that. It's illegal.
Local ordinance. Okay.
Local ordinance. And second of all, you can't whistle after 11 o'clock at night. So no whistling. No whistling after 11 o'clock at night.
What do you think that stems from? Like
a
train whistle?
You wake up the crickets or something. I don't know. But here is a fact you might want to know. One of the big games that Ohio State had was a game against Northwestern, but it was in 1915.
Yeah.
1915. They had a great player named Patty Driscoll, who later on became a head coach.
That's right. Yeah.
You remember that?
Pat Driscoll, yeah.
1915. And in 1915, we had a player who's pretty good name, Chick Harley. And they had a big game for the Big Ten championship. Whoever won the game had a good chance to win the Big Ten. Of course, Ohio State won 23-3. Chick Harley, then after that, of course, a few years later, they built
the house
of Harley built because of all success. But those are a few things about Evanston. But watch those local ordinances; they'll get you every time.
I'll tell you what, that is a pro tip. If you're making the trip, the drive to Evanston this week, don't spit on the sidewalk.
Yeah, so don't call me for bail if you do that. I've already warned you.
That is information you're only going to get here. That's a fact. Thanks so much for joining us, Coach, and appreciate you being with us online here. The Gridiron Nation will come back here next Wednesday afternoon around the same time, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'll get you caught up on what's going on with the Buckeyes. Next week is a big old week.
Oh, yeah.
Big old week at Ohio State. We're going to find out a lot about the Ohio State football team 2019. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you back here next week.